So let's take the golden rule, which you spend a lot of time on. Do unto others as you would have done to yourself. It's also the silver rule, which you didn't mention, but it's sort of the flip side. Don't do to other people what you wouldn't want done to you. And these ethical mottos, why do we follow them in your view? You talk about them as if they're very important. They became very important in Western, certainly in Western civilization, and in Eastern civilization and elsewhere. Other religious precepts came into people's minds. Why do you think they're important?
Well, I think the reason they became important, I think, is a really interesting story, and then we can talk about why they're sort of still important, why they have causal power now.
Yeah,
I mean, the reason they became important is because in the last few centuries, before the Common Era, a variety of world religions popping up in the Indus River Valley, the Yellow River Valley in China, ancient Israel, classical Greece, all discovered, assembled a new kind of religion and spirituality that was more cosmopolitan, less tribal, more universalizing, more devoted to putting our moral preferences into law, codifying our ethical intuitions or hard-won ethical experiences. And in the midst of that, all of these traditions arrived at the idea that the way to be right with God was, or to achieve enlightenment or satisfaction, or, spiritual well-being, was through concern for everybody. And Karen Armstrong, the writer, she writes a lot about religion. Her way of describing this kind of ethical discovery is that somehow, for spiritual fulfillment in all of these traditions, somehow you have to stretch your compassion so that it can embrace the entire world. So this was deeply yoked to spirituality, to sort of the formalizing of ethical thought in a way that people hoped would be generalizable, at least over the, if not over the entire universe of human beings, at least the people in your civilization or your society. So that's how it came about originally. I mean, all of these details are lost to time, obviously. But these are special, these are exceptional changes in how people thought about compassion. And it was really yoked to spirituality in a deep way.
And so the question I want to probe for a little bit, which is tricky, is to think about how self-interested and how altruistic that is. Because you can easily say, and this is, again, the way economists think, I think it's wrong, but the way economists would describe it is, okay, well, nothing's really changed here. This is just self-interest rewritten because I want to go to heaven, or I want to be right with God, the way you phrased it, which I like. So I do these things. I don't like them in and of themselves, but overall it's worth it because I want to get this other benefit. It's an investment.
Sure.
It's no different than, putting away a few seeds for the winter to grow food next summer. And I think that's wrong. But I want you to react to that because I would not call that compassionate. I would call that selfish, actually. And I think it misses something, which I'll get to, but I want to hear you first talk about it. What's your reaction to that?
I think a lot of the justification for the acceptance, at least, honoring it in the breach, this endorsement of the golden rule does have a really self-interested basis in history. The idea that this is, as you say, this is what's going to get you into heaven, or this is what God expects, or we discovered this secret about the fulfilled life, and it involves care for other people. I think that really is deeply embedded in how people took up the golden rule. I think that's how people largely arrived at making it sensible, was in some way they saw it as a key to doing better, being better off, even in these spiritual terms. But I do think ultimately it got some of its teeth from similarly, I think it is a self-interested motivation, but it's an interestingly different self-interested motivation, which is the desire to be consistent with one's principles.
Yeah.
And that's a different kind of thing. I mean, it's still
very different.
I mean, there's, you can be interested in one's own well-being. In principle, one could be deeply interested in a stranger's well-being. But you could help other people or have a conviction to help other people that's not driven by self-interest per se, and it's not driven by other interests, but instead it's driven by an interest in being consistent or faithful to a set of principles.